All right, Chad. So, how did the movie Girl all come about?
Yeah, well, I was really exploring sort of the idea of what happens if you base your whole life on a story that isn't true. And I wanted to take a young woman through this journey of maturation as she sort of starts to vet these things that she's based her life on. And it's that moment when your brain kind of does a 180 and you realize, you know, I've basically been a pawn in my parents' war, and I've been believing left or right my whole life, and I didn't realize there was a center, which is where I exist, you know. And so it was about her self-discovery in the midst of feeling like she was simply a sacrificial pawn in this, you know, ongoing parental battle, which I think a lot of people, you know, have felt that way in their lives, you know.
Right. And this town in Girl is very distinctive. I mean, the scenery alone is very distinctive in this movie. Was there any inspirations from a small town you might have lived in or might have been a part in that you wanted it to kind of look like? Because it is very distinctive in its own character, right, in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, part of that was a discovery through where we ended up shooting. You know, originally this was going to be a southern town, more in your neck of the woods,
Yeah,
and then as we embraced this journey to up to Canada, it became more personal because that's where I grew up, and then became less of a southern and more of a northern, which, you know, I thought was appropriate and for me a little bit vulnerable at first because it became a little closer to home, you know, geographically and therefore I suppose emotionally, you know. But you know, I think a lot of it came from this fascination with these small American towns that, you know, I immigrated to this country, so I had sort of fresher eyes maybe than those who grew up here, just to kind of see the beauty and the brokenness of these forgotten towns, you know, that obviously are playing a bigger part in the sort of political landscape these days as well, you know. And so I was fascinated by that and walking into these towns thinking you understand them, that they maybe fulfill the stereotypes or archetypes that you imagine for them, but they don't. These are real people with beating hearts, and you know, we have to look a little deeper, I think, to get to the truth of them.
and let's talk about the journey it took you to get to this point. Because how long have you been involved with Girl as a project as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I wrote the script, so I came up with the first idea, I think, like 9 years ago. I was in a little town called Kernville in Kern County, California, and it's a little bit more of like a kitschy version of this town. It was almost like the tourist or Disneyland version of where I ended up shooting, but it captured my imagination just because it was really playing into the tropes of itself, and I just had this vision of like, what about a young woman walking into this town with a score to settle? And I just the image of that, and then this maybe she's got this odd weapon in her bag that just doesn't quite fit, but it means something more than the weapon. It actually seems like she's here to hurt the people who hurt her, but really she's here to find out if her father loved her.
Right. And the casting process, I mean, I think personally, Bella Thorne is so underrated. I don't know if people really want to give her the credit that she deserves yet because of how she
Mm-hmm.
is on social media. But when she's acting, it's kind of like that whole Justin Timberlake switch that she has because she just kills every role that she has. And how was
Mm-hmm.
it like casting Bella Thorne in this?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite a different journey than had it been a different actor, because I think most other people that would have played this role, it would have been putting on this character, you know, and a discovery of who this person is, and, you know, creating something. For her, it was, you know, I kept saying to her, like, you understand this character better than I do. I'm going to be asking you more questions, and you're going to be asking me. So I really it was for me, my job was really about kind of stripping away any artifice, any kind of, I didn't even want an accent, you know, a little bit of one kind of emerged, but I wanted it to be as purely and honestly her as possible. So that actually kind of, casting her really defined what the movie was going to be. Another actor, I think, would have been a much more like created, therefore heightened environment. This was like about a stripped, raw, honest exposure, you know?
And that's really who Bella Thorne is in real life too. So again,
Hmm.
that must have been really fun having her in this part because, like you said, she already kind of lives this part, kind of.
Yeah, and has been so courageous in sharing this sharing that part of her life. And, I think my biggest concern was I didn't know her that well when I first met her. So I wasn't sure, how courageous she would be. And then, of course, it took us a while to get the movie together, as they always do. And during that time, I was seeing how brave she was, becoming and sharing her story and being empowered by it, which is what I said to her, and all that stuff kind of got exposed about the photos online. And she was, not willing to sit quietly as these people, hurt her. I remember sending her a message saying, let's turn all of this into art, and that's kind of what we did. It was my wounds, my pain is what wrote this thing, and then it became hers as she embodied it on screen. And hopefully we took that and turned it into art.
And casting such a legendary actor like Mickey Rourke, I mean, the guy was huge in the 80s and early 90s when he was acting. How was it like getting Mickey Rourke to play the sheriff in this? Because like you said, you wanted there to be a little tropes, a little bit here and there with the Southern town. And he kind of has that presence as like a Southern town sheriff already. So how was that like casting Mickey Rourke?
Yeah, I mean, he's who I always wanted. I'm such a fan of his, and I just thought his performance in The Wrestler, of course, is probably one of his most iconic ones, and especially in more recent days. And I just thought he was so, he was bringing who he was to that role, and it was heartbreaking, and it's kind of exactly what I wanted him to do for this. And I always saw his character as being in spiritual warfare, battling these angels and demons. And, I think that's very true of Mickey. I think it's true. You look at his life, he's on that battlefield, and it's what I wanted for the role. And the guy doesn't have to work very hard for all of that to come out. He just it just drips out of him on camera. And, part of working with Mickey is you take the ride of Mickey more than Mickey takes the ride that you're guiding him on. And so it was, he took control of that role, and I'm glad, because it ended up giving the character more authority and power than, if I had been guiding him towards my idea of authority and
power. Right. And since you got Bella Thorne and Mickey Rourke, I mean, how was it casting the rest of the supporting players? Because we kind of knew what we were going to get from Mickey and Bella, which was great performances. But when it came to like the supporting players, how was it like going through that casting process?
Well, in some ways it's the opposite, because I didn't know exactly what Mickey was going to show up with, because, I've never worked with him before, and he had no sort of pre-trial, and same with Bella, whereas everybody else was audition based. So I had a sense of how the tempos and rhythms were going to feel in their mouths and how the character was going to feel in their bodies, but like it was, but we had to cast almost, I think, all of the other roles out of Toronto or locally out of the little town we were in, where we found our bartender. Actually, he was a local guy up there and did such a great job. So that was a little bit more like the first person I cast was Mama. She was, I think, the first person to audition. I thought that was going to be the hardest role to cast. And Elizabeth Saunders is just an absolute titan of an actor.
Yeah. I mean, she was a force in this one too.
Force. Yeah. And again, with her, like when you cast the right people, I find you don't have to do that much. All I had to do is steer her away from an accent, which, as soon as I told her once, she was good. And then it was really just about, kind of letting her know what the movie was, what the genre was, how honest to play it. And, when you cast the right people, you just say a couple things to them and off they go. And she was one of those people. And then the others were like a slower discovery, because I cast a lot. I looked at a lot of auditions, and, it took a while to find the right people for Betty and the character that Mikey Lipka played. And, so it was a process. And then casting myself as Charmer was, a sort of last minute decision as well.
So let's talk about the festivals. I mean, how has it been like this year dealing with the pandemic, sending this film to festivals? Because, of course, you want the biggest screen as possible, but with mostly every festival being virtual this year, how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, it's been difficult, and a cause for innovation. We were originally, there was a path towards us screening at the Directors Fortnight at Cannes, and then also to Toronto. And then as those festivals either got canceled or limited, we suddenly were without a plan. And we were fortunate to land it Fantastic Fest, which I think did a nice job, celebrating the genre aspects of the film. And, I thought they did a really beautiful job. And, we were fortunate enough also to, get distribution through Universal and Screen Media. So I think, given the limitations of exposure right now, I think the film is doing really well. It's just, you can't help but wonder like what a different year would have been like for it. But I think, we're landing on our feet. It's just, I don't know what a theatrical release in November is going to look like.
Right. And the flip side, or the silver lining of stuff going virtual, it can also get a wider audience than possible, just it being in that said state and not being able to go online for other people to be able to access it. Mm-hmm. So even though it is kind of a rare year, you also probably get a much wider audience online than you would in a typical year. So there's always that to look at too.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, I'll take the greater number of eyes over, the prestige, I suppose, of a theater. But there is something nice about getting to watch it like at least once with 300 people or something in a room. Let alone at Sundance, if you get the Eccles Theater, it can be 1,500 people, as I experienced with a film I acted in one time. And that is just, it's so wonderful when a filmmaker gets that opportunity at once with their film. But, I'll have to let it be what it's going to be,
Yeah, and with drive-ins coming back, when I was watching this, I'd be like, man, it would be just so cool to watch this on a drive-in, because it had that atmosphere where it was like everybody's headlights is off, just captivated watching it in a drive-in, because it then kind of had that old throwback style to it.
Yeah, that's true.
So
that's true.
How was it like coming up with that atmosphere when you directed?
Yeah, well, first of all, that's a great idea. We should get this into a drive-in for sure. I don't know why I didn't think about that until now. But the movie definitely came out of a love for these 1970s American films, like Deer Hunter and Coming Home and Five Easy Pieces, and even like into the 80s with like Ordinary People and Tender Mercies. And for me, that was a very natural thing to pay homage to, because those are the films I just binge on. And then I wanted to couple that with a more heightened, evolved cinema, with the sort of the genres that have been evolving,
Yeah, and let's talk about how the genres have evolved, because, I mean, in the 70s and 80s, it was psychological, and now we're kind of, like, Blumhouse is kind of bringing this back for better or for worse with jump scares and psychological, both being up his alley. I mean, what are your thoughts on more recent horror genre movies?
Yeah, I mean, I admittedly am not like completely embedded in horror genres. It's not something I watch or even write. This I guess was much more of like we call like a character-driven thriller. I heard someone call it like a rural neo-noir. I don't. For me, I was really trying to find this hybrid between the sort of almost that noir city feel with a sort of broken rural Western vibe, and then also trying to bridge the tension of a thriller with the character elements of a drama. And I, at the end of the day, I think I just had to let it be what it was going to be. I guess more of a discovery than an imposition. Discovering what your story is rather than saying, "Oh, I'm going to go write that." So
yeah, now that you brought it up, it does kind of feel like a Western, because you shot it so tightly in that small little town to make it feel like a wider paranormal, not paranormal, Theronamic kind of thing that you were shooting with the frame. And like how you did that made it seem like a neo-noir kind of Western feel, since you brought that up. So I appreciate how you put it in that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up, what kind of got you into directing in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, I was like a troubled teenager, just doing stupid things and getting in trouble. And my high school in Victoria, BC, Canada, had this video arts program that basically I graduated by making my own shorts, and it was an amazing career prep program that I think for me like saved me from being an idiot, at least for a while. And then it took me a long time. And then through directing, I actually discovered acting, and that took over for 15 years. And then it wasn't until, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years ago that I started moving back towards writing and directing. And then, got a couple things made as a writer and producer, and then this is the first time that I was sort of given the keys to make the decisions. So it's a longer journey than I thought to get to my first feature. I thought I would have been doing it at like 21, but it took me a couple extra decades.
Well, it's always quality over quantity at this point.
Yeah.
And you seem to have made a fantastic feature with Girl,
thanks.
and I hope a lot of people see it after Fantastic Fest, because what Bella Thorne and Mickey Rourke does in this is nothing sort of special, especially Bella Thorne, who, like I said previously, I think is underrated as an actor. But
I agree. I think if this film does what it can do, I think it will be. I kept telling her, I said, I think this can be your Taxi Driver. That's how I saw it. It's like that kind of a story, and I think she certainly lived up to her end of the game. It's just going to be a matter of people seeing it now.
Well, Chad, thank you so much for joining us at Infamous Horrors. It's been real fun talking to you.
Yeah, likewise, AJ. Thanks, man. I appreciate the love for the film.
All right, until next time, Chad.
Until next time, AJ. See you, buddy.